Welcome back, guys. Episode 9, Boys in Motion podcast. We got Brian, Tyler, Andrew with you today. We're talking about breaking down great tips and tricks on how to excel in endurance sports. Today, we're talking about the world of heart rate training zones. Let's get at it. If you're ever wondering on what zone you should be in, I think you should listen in.
Heart rate training can be a game changer when it comes to optimizing your workouts and understanding your body's limits. Today, we're going to break down what heart rate training zones are, what those zones look like, why they matter, and how you can use them to become a more efficient and effective athlete, whether you're running, cycling, swimming, or doing any other type of sport. Heart rate zones and being informed about how you're training around heart rate zones will help drive your performance.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of experience with heart rate training, and actually a few years back, like I think a lot of runners, I took my easy days way too hard, but I didn't really have a gauge on what too hard was. So I actually started incorporating heart rate training into my daily routine. I found that the injuries that I was facing started to fade away as I took those recovery days way down. And at first, it was a little hard because I was running a lot slower than I was used to. But at the end of the day, it made me a more resilient runner, and I'm able to run more now. So all worked out. So I guess let's jump right into it, and let's talk about what are these heart rate training zones? What are the different zones, and how are they broken up?
Yeah, so heart rate training zones are effectively different places where your heart rate should be relative to your maximum heart rate when you're training. And so these are what you're calling your zones. We're going to break it down into a system of 5 zones for this episode. Zone 1 being the easiest, zone 5 being the hardest. And you're aiming to train for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of distance in a certain heart rate zone. And so what you're trying to do is essentially gauge your output by looking at the data coming from your heart rate. There are other ways that you can kind of gauge your effort, one being something like rate of perceived exertion, but really the heart rate zones is a great way to infer very quickly to actually find out what your training effort is for any piece.
And I find too with heart rate training zones, most of the time you can't go wrong. It's a number that you're following, and it reacts on the conditions, how you're feeling, sickness, how you're recovered. It all has it in there. You could, some days you could feel a little bit tougher on your rate of perceived exertion, but you look down your heart rate, maybe you're flying and you're doing great. So I just like looking at the number. It's a brain dead way to just follow the number.
For sure. And the important thing to note about heart rate training zones is they are a guiding kind of principle when it comes to training. If you go out for a recovery run and you happen to go into a non-recovery heart rate zone, it's not the end of the world, because really it's a linear scale of heart rate, and these are just artificial barriers that we're bucketing into these different training zones. So I guess why would it be important for somebody to be training in different heart rate zones?
Yeah, I would say the biggest benefit for training in these different heart rate zones is that between zone 1 and zone 5, you're going to get different benefits from those. For example, the zone 1 to 2 is more that general aerobic and recovery zone where you're still getting that endurance activity in, but you don't want it to put a big strain on your cardiovascular system. Whereas you move into those zone 3s, 4, and 5, it will really depend what kind of distance you're training for, which one you might want to target, but that will really be targeting the systems that you will be using on race days. So the variance in them allows you to train those specific systems that you'll be using for your event you're training for, but then also pulling back and not burning yourself out, just trying to hammer it all the time at that specific zone 4, let's say if you're training for a marathon. So having that variation allows you to train more efficiently while also improving for the event you're training for.
That's perfect. So we have a few benefits that we'd like to go over about heart rate training. Those are improving your cardiovascular fitness, improving your training efficiency, enhancing your performance and recovery, and then using heart rate zones as a tool to prevent overtraining and injury. So let's break those down. The first is improving your cardiovascular fitness. So, of course, using heart rate zones, and one of the main things that we're doing when we're training endurance sports is actually strengthening the heart. So, regularly training at your aerobic zone, so that's zone 2 and 3, can enhance the heart's ability to pump blood, and it will overall improve your cardiovascular efficiency. It will help increase your endurance because training in lower zones will help you build stamina. And then lastly, using heart rate zones can also, if you use it effectively, increase your oxygen utilization when you actually train in those higher zones, looking at things like VO2 max training, where you actually want to be pushing really high heart rate zones for shorter intervals. The next is better training efficiency. What do you guys see there in terms of using heart rate to increase your training efficiency?
I started seeing it real quick when I started actually like taking a look at staying in within those zones. Like Andrew was saying, you go your zone 2, then you have specific sections or sessions, sorry, for zone 4 and 5 work. It helped with efficiency because you're not always gassed out, you're not always tired on a week by week basis. You could put in more miles and it's more quality miles, so you could kind of play with that training plan and work with your different zones on different days. It also matters on, like everybody's been saying, recovery, recovery, recovery. You want to avoid your injuries and stay at the peak as you possibly can with that training block.
Yeah, and I think my favorite saying for this bit is easy days easy, hard days hard. And heart rate training really allows you to differentiate those based on what zone you're in. When you want to go hard, go hard. When you want to go easy, take that time to recover. I find a lot of people getting into endurance sports collapse into that middle, quite frequently into that zone 3 for 90% of their training. And there is a lot of benefits to have polarizing workouts where you're way at the top and way at the end to really get a lot of training efficiency.
That's hard to do.
Oh, absolutely. I think going hard enough on those hard days is can be tricky and uncomfortable, especially as you're just getting into it.
Yeah, and that was a great tip that you told me early in my training, was to relax on my slower runs, because I ended up like going to my tough workouts already so exhausted by just general aerobic work. And so using heart rate data to actually use a data driven approach to my training, so monitoring my heart rate zones, making sure that I'm staying within my limits on those easy workouts, allowed me to really push hard workouts. And that gave me so much more benefit to my training and made me a much more efficient runner.
Oh yeah, I don't leave the house without the heart rate monitor, that's for sure.
Got to get strapped up.
Always
And on to
strapped on.
always strapped on. And on to the next, which is enhanced performance and recovery. I think that kind of echoes on that last point, is that if we're using that heart rate to really dial in our training, is that we can get more out of our training as we are pushing those upper limits and those threshold zones. But then when we recover, we go all the way down to zone 2, zone 1 potentially if we're really beat up, so that we can smash that next workout and we're not just feeling completely depleted.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that leads perfectly into the last benefit of using heart rate training, is that avoidance of overtraining and injury. So by tracking your heart rate, you can avoid constantly pushing yourself too hard, which is a key in preventing any injuries or even burnout in the sport. Because if you're always pushing the heart rate higher than you should be, you're not going to love every workout, because you don't have that balance between easy and hard. For injury prevention, training at appropriate intensities when you should be will help maintain a proper form, reduce the risk of stress related injuries. And lastly, of course, for injury prevention and overtraining, it's key you listen to your body. The data is great, training on heart rate is great, but it can only go so far. If you are trying to stick with a certain high heart rate zone, but you're injuring yourself in the process, that's an issue. So listen to your body and inform yourself with the data. It's really kind of those two approaches that merge to make you a better athlete.
Yeah, you use them both together to try to be the best you can be. Like just one more thing to add on that, like sometimes too the data shows you trends that can lead to you being overtrained or tired and lead to even like just getting sick in general because your heart rate zones are getting too high and you're becoming too overtrained, and then your body wants to recover, so it kind of forces you to stop. So you kind of got to listen to yourself and listen to the data.
Yeah. So we've talked about the benefits and what heart rate training is, but how would somebody actually go out and figure out what their heart rate zones are?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a gear requirement, and it is possible that you might already have what you need. So the first option is if you do have a running watch and you wear that during whatever activity you're doing, that does have an optical heart rate sensor. When you're just getting into it, that can work. The accuracy isn't necessarily the best and can have some weird spikes, different temperatures, you can get some kind of skewed results. So I would say if you are wanting to dive into training with heart rate zones, a small investment of about $50 will get you a good heart rate strap, $50 to $100 depending on what you want. And that heart rate strap will give you reliable data that you can really trust as you're doing your training. So that would be step one in determining is getting the required gear.
Get strapped up, step one, baby.
So once you have that required gear, of course you'd want to run some sort of test to figure out what your maximum heart rate is. And Andrew, I know you had talked previously about the Maffetone method to find your zone 2 approximate heart rate, which would be 180 minus your age. But that might not get you to exactly your maximum heart rate. What are some ways that people can get their maximum heart rate number?
Yeah, I think the most used formula, it's very generic, kind of similar to the Maffetone method, which it's not a one size fits all. But for the maximum heart rate, is the Fox formula is 220 minus your age. So that will give you approximate of what your max heart rate is. This definitely is not accurate. Some people, it will be way too high or way too low, depending on this maximum heart rate, which is often genetics. So really the most accurate way to measure your maximum heart rate would be to do a VO2 max test in a lab setting. So that is the gold standard. That will give you absolutely great results. You'll be able to find that for sure number and be pretty confident about that so that you can build all your zones from that. Now, I know that's not necessarily accessible for everyone. So a good at-home test with that heart rate strap or optical sensor that you have with you is to go outside with that gear. And running is a good way to do this just because it's very good at elevating your heart rate. I'm sure you could do something similar on a bike as well. But for a running test is to perform about 2 to 5 kilometer warm up. So 1 to 3 miles, get your heart rate elevated a little bit. And then you want to run completely max effort for 3 minutes without stopping. And I mean, max effort at the end, you are bent over, just done. You really want to be as fast as you possibly can for 3 minutes. And then once you slow down, you want to just recover for another 3 minutes and then repeat that again at maximum effort for 3 minutes. And then at the end, in those spikes of max effort, you'll just want to see that maximum heart rate for those periods. And that's a pretty good indication of what your max heart rate might be.
So for these workouts, and we're going to focus on running first, I do have some opinion on cycling or other sports to actually try to find your max heart rate. Myself personally, I do find that it's easiest running rather than biking or something like the pool. So when you're running those hard intervals, so you are doing 3 3-minute intervals, are you trying to pace yourself at all so that you can hold the maximum pace over the 3 minutes, or are you going out in a sprint 100% max from the start, and then by like 20 seconds in, you're actually fading off your pace, even though your heart rate might continue to climb? What's better for people to do?
So yeah, this you definitely, when I say max out, I definitely do mean for the entire 3 minutes. So yeah, it's not a 100-meter sprint, but it's as fast as you can for that 3 minute sustained effort. Just with the way heart rate works, it sometimes slowly, gradually inclines. So 3 minutes is about that time you need for it to actually kind of reach that plateau and that peak that you can actually get that measure.
That's freaky. I'd be pulled over to the side of the road just throwing up chunks.
Yeah, that is a tough workout, but it's similar to a lot of VO2 max workouts at the end of the day. And if you're training seriously, this is something that you probably have in your training calendar. So even from those workouts, you can infer your maximum heart rate. Now, of course, for running, this is great. If you are slower, like I'm sure there's some people listening who may not be able to run for 3 minutes, so walking at as fast a pace as possible may also get you there depending on your level of fitness. And then lastly, on the bike, I do find sometimes it's a little more difficult to get to my maximum heart rate. Maybe it's a byproduct of only using your legs more and your upper body can be relatively stable. So it's definitely worth exploring running rather than cycling for this, in my opinion.
Hockey is what has gotten my heart rate the highest it's ever been. I think the mix of adrenaline, your stimulus, like your brain is stimulating, trying to chase this friggin' puck around, and it's basically intervals. It's I've gotten into the 200s playing hockey, but with running, it's very hard for me to get at 200.
That's the Ironman speaking.
That
Getting
that's
into the 200, you just got to get a bit more speed in that training.
that's hard. That's hard. I can't get into the twos.
Yeah, well, so now we have an estimate of our max heart rate, no matter what method you use, whether you just want to use a simple formula or you want to go through doing this at-home test. So now we can go to the next step to establish our heart rate zones so that we can better understand where our heart rate should be for different types of workouts. So starting at zone one, so this is just very light kind of warm-up activities. That will be 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. Then we move into zone two, the bread and butter of endurance, and that's about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And then we have zone three, which is that the middle of the sandwich right in the middle. It's not easy, but it's not hard. That's about 70 to 80%. And then zone four, which for a lot of endurance athletes is where we will be for a lot of our kind of quicker stuff, maybe half marathon pace. So that's the anaerobic threshold kind of work. That's 80 to 90% of your max heart rate. And then you have zone five, which is 90 to 100%. And that's that all out sprint efforts. So that's really just full on anaerobic activity, which we don't get to too often around here.
Zone six, 110%, baby.
Oh no, the forbidden zone, the bonk.
That's the bonk zone, exactly.
So when we're looking at these heart rate zones, the reason that we're training and even establish these heart rate zones is for different fitness goals, essentially. So different purposes, and we have some training examples to kind of illustrate why and when you might be in each zone. So let's break that down. So zone one, your recovery zone, this is a rate of perceived exertion, potentially of like 2 to 3. It's very light, and this is for active recovery. It does improve your overall health, but it's really not one of the main building blocks when you're looking at training towards a race, for example. So
That's the coffee zone. That's like the coffee zone.
That's exactly what I was going to say. These are your easy runs, your cool downs, your warm ups. And then also, if you're on the bike, it might be your coffee chat ride, just like something easy and very, very enjoyable, but it's not the main fitness builder.
Zone two, my favorite, the endurance zone. That's like we were saying, 60 to 70% of your heart rate max, and that's just low and slow, baby. It's one step up from the Kenyan shuffle, but it's still the low zone there where you're building your endurance, you're building your aerobic capacity. I once had a good friend of mine tell me a good, I guess, what is it, visualization. You increase your zone 2, it's like a triangle. The base of your triangle is your zone 2. The wider you make that base, the higher you can make that tip, baby.
The important thing about zone 2, and this, a lot of people talk about this as like the golden zone for endurance training. Generally, it will be around 80% of your total weekly volume will fall into zone 2, your endurance building zone. Tadej Pogacar, the best cyclist in the world right now, his coach has him at approximately 90% of his total volume is in zone 2. So examples of zone 2 training would be your long runs, steady state cardio. We hear that all the time. That is zone 2. And some keys to realize that you're in zone 2 right off the top. We published the short about this during the running challenge, but if you can breathe through your nose in out the whole time, you're probably in zone 2. You're not going too hard, not going too easy. You should be able to maintain a conversation, but it shouldn't be that easy to keep talking. So you should just kind of be able to say full sentences, maybe a paragraph here and there, but it shouldn't be so easy that you're falling into that recovery zone.
That's why it's my favorite zone, because I'm an absolute motor mouth. So all I do is talk the whole time, and people just listen. It's friggin'
That,
nice.
that might be the only reason you're training.
Oh, that is the only reason. I've heard from many people. It's like, hey, you want to go on a zone 2 run? Come with me, and I'll join.
I'll talk your ear off, baby.
Oh, I'll talk. I'll chat it up. Better than any other hangout, because you just get to talk. You're stuck with me the whole time.
Who knows? Maybe at one point we'll record a full podcast all running, just at that steady state zone 2, just chatting.
Oh, it's better. It'd be better than the my whoosh, the the whole time.
I can't wait to introduce the podcast listeners to My Whoosh come the winter, our bike training platform.
Tune Up Tuesday podcast, baby. I can't wait.
Counting down the days.
Zone 3, we'll just do a quick little snippet on. This is your aerobic zone. This is sort of that middle ground between the low intensity endurance building and the high intensity threshold building. And so oftentimes the recommendation is that not much of your training should be in zone 3 because you can be more effective at training your zone 2 and your zone 4, zone 5. So your aerobic training zone, this enhances your aerobic capacity. It does increase your stamina, maybe not as effectively, but these would be like tempo runs and marathon pace workouts. They are a part of most training plans, but it's not going to be a significant amount of your total volume.
And then we move on to zone 4, the threshold zone. So some training examples here are interval training, hill repeats. I would even say half marathon to 15K intervals as we move into threshold. So yeah, this is going to improve your lactate threshold and will increase your speed. So this is really the zone where you start getting that leg turnover. You get your heart pumping a little bit more, and you're really improving that upper end of your endurance and moving, just about to move into that anaerobic zone. We're leaving the aerobic zone for just a second.
Anaerobic is blast off, baby. 90 to 100% of your heart rate. I'm telling you right now. Zone 5. It is blast off, rocket ship, let's go. Develops fast twitch muscles, gets you going on that fast finish. I like it.
Yeah, and zone 5, your VO2 max zone. Training examples here would be sprint intervals. So like you might have like 200 meters on, 200 meters off. That's a workout I did today. Smashed it. It's hard. It's tough on the legs. It's not something that is it's the significant amount of your total weekly mileage because it is so tough on your body, but it does give you the ability to have a burst of power, and it trains those muscles that allow you to maximize your aerobic power. And when you were talking about that pyramid where zone 2 is at the bottom, your VO2 max is at the top. That's the height and the peak of that pyramid. So training this is just as important because you basically want to maximize the total area of that pyramid. So you can't neglect this. But darn is it ever hard to do.
Oh, it's hard. I did some tip of the work yesterday too, and I did not miss that. It's borderline torture. I know Andrew, you're the complete opposite. I think you like that stuff.
Oh yeah, I love interval training. I mean, I love getting the heart pumping. It feels good, but I like it because it makes an half marathon pace feel slow. So you do some of that, you could go down to, you're dipping into those 5 minute miles, and then, 6 minute miles they feel pretty comfortable once you're good and trained. So it's important. Don't neglect it.
Yeah, actually, quick tangent on that. That what you said, Andrew. I shout out to Coach Mike. Did a workout with him yesterday, and it was pretty nice. It was 6 times 500 or 2 minutes on, which was basically 500 meters. So like we're doing 345, 350 Ks 6 times, and then we went into a 2K at like 435 pace, which was felt easy. It was nice. It made those 4 minutes per kilometers feel slower. So that's a pretty cool thing to do after your hard interval.
Yeah, that's a huge benefit of training the top of that pyramid. So let's talk about some practical tips that we've learned along the way when it comes to heart rate training. So the number one thing is like, how do you actually monitor your heart rate when you're in a workout? Because this is a big thing. Like you can arm yourself with the equipment to do so, but if you're not actually using that data to train smarter, it's not going to have the impact you're looking for. So of course, using a heart rate monitor, a smartwatch or a fitness tracker is key. So myself, I always strap up with a heart rate monitor, and then I have that heart rate directly feeding to my Apple Watch. I know Garmin and your watch, the Coros, same thing, heart rate strap, link it to your watch. And then afterwards, you can also analyze that on Strava or your native fitness tracking app on your phone. And so that allows you to break down your workout, actually analyze that after your workout. But for me, I really like the interface on my watch while I'm working out, so I know exactly what heart rate I am at any time. Even today, I knew like after my intervals, I needed to slow rate down so that I came down to that cool down zone, because right after those intervals, I was feeling myself kind of being too high in that zone three. So I had to make a concerted effort to lower my heart rate, run a little slower, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the data feed right in front of me.
That is a good point. And then you see those nice little spikes in your chart after you analyze your stuff. Another tip, adjusting your plan based on heart rate. So we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but variables like weather, caffeine, you gotta look at your caffeine intake, folks, and quality of sleep and how you recover, because quality of sleep is a big factor on those morning runs or rides if you didn't sleep well enough the night before, or even alcohol consumption and nutrition. That does affect your heart rate the next day even. So just take a look at that kind of stuff too to help.
And out of those, I think weather and the change, especially if you have changing of seasons, for me personally, as I go into the summer months, heat and humidity really affects my heart rate. So I kind of put it a little bit on the back burner and more go by rate of perceived effort, just because sometimes my heart rate will spike, and even on just really humid days in the middle of the summer. So that is definitely one big thing to take into consideration.
That's to Ottawa. Breezy 10 degrees today. It's friggin' nice.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm very over the humidity here. It is not nice. But yeah, and just a few common mistakes to avoid that I'm sure a lot of us have fallen into. You said it before, is training too hard in those easy zones. Those recovery workouts are there in your plan for recovery. And if you think you're going slow, my advice to you is to go slower in those. You're just trying to get a little bit, the legs moving a little bit of distance. You're not doing those workouts to get faster. So go slower.
You heard it here first, folks. Go slower.
Yeah, I mean, go check out on my Strava, look at some of my recovery runs. I am in the Kenyan shuffle, as Tyler would say.
Yeah, you got to go slow to go fast sometimes. Another key tip is when you're actually ignoring the reality that you might be overtraining just because you're following your plan and you're following your allotted time and heart rate zones. Your plan might be over aggressive for your body. You might not be having the best recovery in between workouts. And so at a certain point, the data can only tell you so much. And so listen to your body, understand that heart rate isn't the end all be all when it comes to tracking data. If all you're doing is tracking heart rate, you're ignoring a lot of the other factors that impact your ability to increase your endurance capability.
Also guilty. Like I mentioned before, you start getting tired, you start getting a little sick, and then you fall into that overtraining train, and you don't want to be on that train. You got to jump right off.
Another thing is if you have other pieces of data that you could be looking at and you're ignoring those and only looking at heart rate, that can also be a downfall. So, like the number one thing, and we've talked about this before, is RPE, rate of perceived exertion. And so, this is kind of a scale of 1 to 10, just how hard do you feel like you're going? This is generally a very good gauge into how you're training. And so that's just kind of like a rule of thumb to use in combination with your heart rate. The other thing is, especially on the bike, you might have a bike computer that's feeding you your power, your wattage, or even like your speed. Those are also important factors to look at when it comes to kind of understanding how much you're exerting yourself, because power and heart rate in a combined data stream will be better than only using heart rate.
I get a little too caught up with that too, though. I kind of at that point sometimes I look at the power number and I throw heart rate out the window. So you kind of need that balance of all of those metrics and see how you feel, and you go based on at the end of the day what you could see and what's the best for you at that point.
Yeah, and then just one more is especially, and this is especially important if didn't haven't done the VO2 max test and lab testing where you're very confident in your max heart rate number, is to not personalize your heart rate zones. So just as like a little anecdote example here, if I were to take the Foss's formula of 220 minus my age, I do 220 and then I will get 193 for my max heart rate. And then if I put it into context of Chicago Marathon 2023 for me, where I ran a PR after an injury in a negative split, and my heart rate was high 170s. If I find that zone three, the top end of zone three, which is kind of where you'll be running your marathons, that gives me that the heart rate I should be targeting for marathons is 154. So obviously, I'm able to sustain a high 170 for a marathon and negative split. So, like, I raced it correctly. I had energy left over. But if I were listening to these approximate formulas, I would be running at a 154 and not reaching my potential. So, really, you need to see how you feel, do the workout, see how you feel during them, and then adjust things based on that. Because, yeah, if I'm at 154, I mean, I'd probably be leaving like 20 minutes on the table or something. So, yeah, I don't want that. You gotta pump up those numbers.
You don't want to leave anything on the table, that's for sure.
Yeah, so we covered everything you need to know about heart rate training. We talked about, of course, what heart rate zones are, the benefits of using heart rate for your training, how you can go about calculating and testing your own maximum heart rate, and then how you would actually establish your heart rate zones. And then we walked through each of the 5 zones and what their purpose is, what they're targeting when you're actually working out in those zones. And then we talked about some practical tips for heart rate training. That wraps up the main points of the episode. But we've got some really exciting news because Tyler has a hot take of the week.
Oh, I got a nice hot take. It has to do with the content, so it's even better. I've been thinking ever since I started this amazing endurance journey, zone 3, put it in the garbage. Poubelle.
So just no marathon pace work?
Not no marathon pace work, but none of this floater zone. Hey, I don't know what's going on here between 2 and 4. 3, you don't train in that unless you're doing marathon work. I don't call that zone 3. I call that MP.
My counterpoint to your hot take, which I do think is a hot take, is I think people getting into endurance sports, I think that's a great take. As you progress in your journey and you are more focusing on performance, I think zone 3 work is very important. And that's
I
all.
hate it. I hate zone
Are
3.
maybe Tyler is still a beginner. Maybe that's
Oh,
what
he's,
the inference is.
yeah, a junior Ironman for sure.
Well, and if you look at my marathon times, it just goes like this. So maybe that does speak to my hot take.
Yeah, he's just never heard of zone 3.
Because
What a guy.
honestly, I'm going zone 4 or zone 4, 5, or go to the bench. I don't look at zone 3. Maybe that's the key.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that zone 3 is so vilified is because most of your workouts are supposed to be zone 2, and the pitfall of most people training, if you're not using heart rate, or you're looking at heart rate but you're not actually applying it, is that you are constantly kind of creeping into zone 3 where you're not actually clearing your lactate at 100%. You're not at zone 2, and that's why they vilify zone 3.
I like it. I like being hot take guy.
My question is, at what zone do lizard eyes come out?
Oh, I'm telling you, that's the zone 6, maybe even zone 7. The lizard comes out once in a while to play a little bit.
Yeah, the lizard eyes is like Tyler at the end of the race when, he's seeing cross-eyed. I mean, me too. We were talking about how I'm going to be at the end of the 5K. It's not going to be pretty.
Oh, it's gonna be nice. I'm out there with my camera waiting for you.
Yeah. Well, I hope to finish before you, of course, or at the same time. The one like pet peeve that I have about heart rate, and it relates to heart rate training, is like going out on a group ride where you're going out on a ride that's supposed to be easy, and you want to stay in zone 2 the whole time, and then there's like attacks going off the front. You feel like you need to like actually like compete when you're trying to just do a steady state zone 2 ride with the boys in motion from Niagara on
That
our
never happens.
Tuesday rides. It's just chaos. I'll be like, okay, today in this long ride, I'm trying to stay in zone 2, and then boom, all of a sudden, Adam's ripping off in a flyer on the bike, and your heart rate is spiking.
You got to catch him before he bonks. That's the problem.
I mean, if you're in his dust, you never know if he bonked because he's so far ahead. He's got time to bonk and then come back after a donut. So it's simple.
That is true, though. That is a good point. I always catch myself like in those long rides with the group, just like playing into those games and just putting that heart rate, everything we just talked about, out the window and just going out for the fun of it and trying to push yourself. But at the same time, that's the fun part of it too, right?
For sure, but this is key, is like when you're training with other people, you need to be strict about what you're setting up that workout to be before you start. If you're training in heart rate zones and you want to stay in zone 2, you've got to talk about that with your training partners, with the other people you're with, especially on the bike, because your route matters as well. If there's a ton of hills, it's really tough to stay in zone 2 because you're going to have some spikes to zone 5 if you've got like an 8 to 10% climb here and there throughout the ride. It's tough to keep that pinned at like 150 beats per minute.
Stay tuned for my ride this weekend. It's exactly the opposite of what we've been talking about. So it's going to be nice.
Speaking of routes, I heard you guys did a thing this past weekend. Tell me a little bit more about that thing you guys did.
We did. I came down on the long weekend. We did a scope. We scoped out the BIM 5K official race course, Allenberg.
We did the full 5K route. We kind of understand where the start point would be. And yeah, it looks to be a fast course. It's really, really nice because it's not totally straight the full course. And when you're turning around and coming back at about 1,000 meters to 800 meters, you're taking a little bit of corners, hopping over a really small bridge. So it gives you a good indicator of when like you can really let it rip at the end, and also when you need to make sure that you're settling down that pace at the start.
Yeah, I like it. And also the turnaround, there's kind of a big landmark that you could kind of see in the distance, maybe I don't know, I would say another 800 meters away. So you see that turnaround point, and then that'll be the key. We'll probably have a cone or some paint out there too to turn people around. But it's a pretty good course, I think, for pretty flat, just that little bit of a undulation on the for the bridge, and pretty nice.
Yeah, and for those that are familiar with the area, it's actually the north side of the like of Highway 20.
Yeah, no hills.
So yeah, it's totally flat, and we go out to the north towards Thorold, 2k, 2.5k out, 2.5k back, and we're starting right. There's like a nice parking lot, lots of parking, and right now there are two porta potties. We will need to see if they stay the full season because it would be nice for there to be some bathrooms on site.
Very nice. I'm excited. Excited to hear that it's speedy. Hoping to get a pretty nice. I'll be slightly tapered by then.
Yeah. Well, you guys know my goal. Sub 20, and I don't want it to be close. I want to blow through 20. I don't think I'll be able to be fast enough to be in the like in the 18s, but if I'm like mid to high 19s, I'll be really happy because I've never run a sub 20 minute 5K. Do you guys have any clue? You guys are in training plans. Anything you want to hit?
I can't wait to see that for sure. Andrew?
I would be pretty happy if I could go sub 17. I'm not training for a 5K, but if I could hit sub 17, it would be nice. My PR
Nice. So
is
fast.
17:20, so it's a little bit of work to do, but
20 seconds. That's just a blink of an eye, really. That's what, a 200-meter gold race? That's
yeah,
it.
easy. So, but we'll see. We'll see. To be determined. Soft commit.
That's so fast. Tyler, are you gonna go for that sub 20? Do you think you have it in the legs?
That'll be a game time decision. I doubt it. It'll be what, I think like 13 days post Ironman, so I'll be happy if I could walk straight. But I'll definitely try and beat the Peroche brothers, that's for sure.
Yeah, you might have a good battle with Mark actually because he's gonna
That's
be
true.
faster than the last BIM 5K because he's got all that cycling fitness in him.
That's true. I think I'm gonna go head to head with one of the BIM boys, and see what I could give them a run for their money.
Nice. Very nice. And speaking about training and goals, Tyler, you're in triathlon Ironman training. How are the workouts going? How's the body feeling?
Body's feeling good. Had as you all know, the Kingston Try had kind of a down week, and now we're ramping back up. I'm gonna do 4 or 5 weeks of strong push. I'm on week 10 of 16, so another 4 or 5 weeks depending how I feel, and then a nice little week or two taper, and then it's showtime. So the legs are feeling good. Just gonna start putting some more miles on them and slowly get them tired and ready for that long burn. So I'm excited to see what comes up.
Yeah, and I'm on week 2 of my 12-week build for the Toronto Marathon. Did my first marathon pace workout last week. I did it during peak heat and humidity. So I had to do a bit of a modification. I just did 1 mile and then half-mile jog, and just I to actually hit everything, and I was able to hit everything. I think between like 6:13s and 6:17 miles for each mile. So I was still able to do it, but I had to modify it.
So
Um,
what were you doing? One on and half off?
Half off. I just like a jog, recovery
Yeah,
jog.
just to keep your heart rate back to like lower it a bit and then bring it back up.
Yeah, yeah. It was just
Too
first
hot.
week. I wasn't ready for the workout, and it was way too humid. Like my shirt
Yeah.
was like actually dripping at the end. Like I was probably an extra 10 pounds.
So question is, you got to go shirtless. Just go with a bra on.
That
You got to
is
just
so. I wasn't shirtless because I was doing a little bit of product testing, but I won't. I won't give too much away.
Wow, that's a teaser if I've ever heard one. That's so exciting.
I'll give one thing away. My nips never felt better after the run.
That's
So
good.
you better be
Anti-chafe
ready.
shirt.
Oh yeah.
Anti-chafe shirt is so important. That's cool. And you were away last weekend, Andrew. You went on a portaging trip, which I have coming up, well, by the time this episode releases, I will be mid-portage in the backcountry.
True. You'll be rowing it up.
Exactly. And I really like the portage trip as a nice kind of travel for endurance mans because it keeps the body moving, but you're not necessarily using all the same muscles that you would be in a peak week. So I'm not upset that my training plan will be slightly interrupted with this travel because I'll be out there on the water doing some canoeing, some paddling, some hiking, and all of that.
Yeah, that's actually maybe a hack, eh, boys? You guys are doing those portage trips instead of just laying on the beach drinking some margaritas.
I mean, definitely beats that as far as a vacation for reaching the goals. But yeah, it was great. Great combination of using different muscles, just that nice zone one, zone two, depending if you're just doing nice paddles or doing portages where you're lifting a bit. But I definitely discovered some back muscles that I haven't used in a while, so that's always nice.
Beautiful. And it's really good for the tri-mans because you can go swim in some beautiful lakes. I heard that Albert put together a little race against you and another guy in a canoe.
Oh yeah, so it was, I would say about 200 meters is our estimate. We could be completely off because we were just, doing our little golf scope to the other side of the lake. But he had to go from our campsite to the rock on the other side, and then me and someone else were in a canoe, and we had to go there, back, there, and we were racing. I mean, of
Wait,
course.
and he was swimming?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's sick.
It was pretty close, so we did end up winning. We pulled off the W, but when we were coming back, Albert was still a decent amount back, so we were like, "Oh, this is pretty easy." So we pulled off just a little bit, and then as we went for that last final out, it seemed like the distance he went like almost doubled. So then we just blasted for that last lap, and it was fun. It was close, but
That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I'm a little bit tempted to bring like the buoy, like the swimming buoy, and go out for a swim during
That's a
the
try
race.
play. That's a try play for sure.
Yeah, just for the extra visibility and something to float on because I'm not the biggest swimmer, so I can't go that far without needing a little bit of a rest. So it's nice to have the inflatable too.
So a little story about on the way back. Just happened to be in a car with Albert on the way back, and the influence was rubbing off. And I was just on my phone. He was napping, and I was looking on Ironman sites to see which pro races were coming up because I love watching the races. But as soon as I type in Ironman.com, Albert wakes up immediately and is like, "So are we signing up?" And I was like, "Frig." So I was just
Right.
looking, but he has that radar.
I think you got to
I
get in the
have
water.
I have an interesting question for Tyler, and maybe this is what we end off the episode on, is you could just give us a quick little answer. Half Ironman race. Who wins, Andrew or I?
Oh, frig. For a 70.3? The thing is the bike is so important. So it would be close, but Andy would have to shape it up on the bike. But then he blows everyone out of the water on the run. So it'd be interesting.
That's what
Thing
I'd
it,
be spooked
yeah.
for, is I might be ahead,
And
but
then
that
you
guy's
just
gonna blow by me.
The thing is, we
exactly.
don't know where we are on the swim either.
That's why I didn't even mention the swim.
Yeah,
But
two
but but
rocks.
that could make a difference. Like say I'm 2 hours and Brian's 2 hours and 5 minutes, or the opposite. That 5 minutes. Who
Yeah,
knows?
that is true because like I was just thinking of that actually today actually is like if someone comes out of the water, let's say 6 7 minutes faster than you, you have to make up that time biking obviously first, and then you got to finish it off with the run. So it'd be pretty interesting. It'd be pretty fun. Maybe we do a backyard 70.3, see what the boys can handle.
We might need to line it up. That'd be real fun.
I hear the Seine's open and available for us to swim in if we want to do it there. I hear they got real nice water over there in France.
Oh yeah, right there. I'm in. All right, folks, we're wrapping it up. What a great chat. That was amazing. Some fun, some laughter, and some friendship. Thanks for tuning in on this episode here today, Boys in Motion podcast. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Join our Strava club at Boys in Motion. We've got some great content continuing to come your way. You can subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And just your weekly reminder that we are absolutely not medical professionals, and the advice and tips that we share is just based on our experiences and quick Google searches. So always consult your healthcare professional before you make any changes to your exercise routine.
And remember, folks, keep moving and grooving, stay motivated, and we'll see you next time.